When you're building software, there are a few choices you make early on that end up defining, well, everything. And maybe the biggest one of all is your architecture. Are you going to build a single, unified monolith or a whole collection of independent microservices? Get this wrong, and it can literally sink your project. So let's break it down and figure out how to get it right.
And this right here really hits the nail on the head. The foundation you choose for your app is just so critical. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you build it on a shaky architectural foundation, it's just going to crumble the second you try to scale. The stakes really couldn't be higher.
So, this is the big question, right? The great debate, monolith or microservices. But here's the thing, it's not about which one is better in a vacuum. It's about which one is right for your project, right now. In this explainer, we're going to give you the mental framework to make that call with total confidence.
All right, let's start with the classic, the traditional approach that has powered, countless successful applications for years, the monolith.
So what does that actually mean? Well, it means everything. The front-end user interface, the back-end logic, how you process payments, the notification system, it's all bundled together into one single indivisible program. It's just one big chunk of code.
To make this super clear, just imagine a big restaurant with one giant kitchen. You've got one team of chefs, one menu, one whole system. And at first, it's really efficient, super easy to manage. But if that one kitchen has a problem, let's say the main oven breaks, the entire restaurant just stops serving food. That, in a nutshell, is a monolith.
So technically speaking, what this looks like is one single codebase for the whole app. When you want to update anything, even a tiny typo, you have to deploy the entire thing all at once. And it usually runs on a single server or maybe a few identical servers. It's simple, but man, everything is tightly connected. Now, I've got to stop here for a second because this is really important. There's this popular idea floating around that monoliths are old-fashioned or just plain bad, and that is absolutely not true. In fact, for a lot of situations, it's the best choice you can possibly make. And you can see why, right? The benefits are pretty clear. Building, testing, deploying, it's all so much simpler because it's all one piece. If you're a small team or a startup trying to build an MVP, that speed is a massive, massive advantage. And debugging? Way easier, since you can trace a problem through a single unified application. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? This is where the story takes a bit of a turn. That beautiful simplicity that made the monolith so attractive at the beginning, well, it starts to create some serious headaches as your app, your user base, and your team all start to get bigger. So here's the deal. That single code base can turn into a giant, tangled mess. A tiny change in, say, the notifications feature means you have to redeploy the entire application, which is always risky. And maybe worst of all, scaling is so inefficient. If your payment module is getting slammed with traffic, you can't just add more power to that one part. You have to scale the whole app, which is incredibly expensive. It was exactly these challenges, these growing pains, that led to the rise of a totally different way of thinking, an architecture designed from the ground up to solve the problems of scale, microservices. The core idea here is really just breaking things up. Instead of one giant application, you split it into a bunch of small, totally independent services. Each service is responsible for exactly one thing. One for logging users in, one for payments, one for product search. You get the idea. So let's go back to our analogy. Instead of one big restaurant kitchen, now I want you to think of a food court. You've got a pizza place, a burger joint, and a smoothie stand. They all operate independently. If the pizza oven breaks, who cares? You can still get a burger. The failure of one small part doesn't bring the whole system crashing down. So technically, what we're talking about here is a complete flip from the monolith. Each service is its own little mini application. It's got its own code base, its own deployment pipeline, and it can even have its own dedicated database. They all talk to each other over a network, but they are not tied together in one big package. And this is where you see the real power of microservices. Remember that scaling problem we had? Well, here, if the payment service is getting hammered, you just scale that one service. That's it. Deployments are faster and safer because you're only pushing a small, isolated change. And different teams can work on their own services without tripping over each other.
Okay, this all sounds pretty amazing, right? Like the perfect solution to all our problems. But hold on.
Before you run off and decide to rebuild everything as microservices, we need to have a serious reality check. This approach is absolutely not a free lunch. The complexity here is just on another level. You're not managing one application anymore. You're managing dozens, maybe hundreds of them. You have to worry about the network between them failing. And debugging a single request that hops across 5 different services can be an absolute nightmare. This all requires a really strong DevOps team and fancy monitoring tools, which all adds up.
And this right here might be the single most important thing to get from this entire explainer. Moving from a monolith to microservices is not like upgrading your phone to a newer, better model. It's a fundamental trade-off. You are trading the beautiful simplicity of a monolith for the incredible scalability and flexibility of microservices, and you're paying for it with a massive, massive increase in complexity.
So, with all of that in mind, how on earth do you actually make the right choice for your project?
Let's just put it all out there, side by side. You can see the pattern, right? For complexity and cost, monolith is low, microservices are high. For scaling, monolith is all or nothing, while microservices are super precise. Debugging? Simple versus, well, really hard. This table just makes those trade-offs crystal clear.
So let's get real for a second. You have to be honest about your situation. If you're a small team just trying to ship a product and find your first users, the speed and simplicity of a monolith is your absolute best friend. But if you're a big company with multiple teams that need to work independently and scale to millions of users, then that overhead of microservices becomes a necessary investment.
Look, if you remember only one single thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this. Do not start with microservices just because they sound cool. Start with a well-designed, clean monolith. As you grow, the application itself will tell you when it hurts. That pain, the slow deployments, the scaling bottlenecks, that will be your guide for when and where to split things up.
And hey, this isn't just a theory, this is the proven path. Look at almost any of the biggest names in tech. They didn't start with some super complex web of microservices on day one. No way. They built a successful product with a monolith. And then, as they grew, they strategically and slowly carved out services where it made the most sense.
So, I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Is the architecture you're choosing, or the one you already have, built for today's needs, or is it secretly creating tomorrow's pain? The best choice solves your problems right now without mortgaging your future. It's all about finding that perfect balance. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer.